Okay, so you join me here for the final race of this round of the ZRL for the opening sort of race series in the early autumn. 6 round series. There were 2 time trials, 2 sort of points races, and this is the second of 2 scratch races. It's been a really hilly series on the whole. Historically, traditionally, ZRL has been quite sprinty and points heavy. That definitely hasn't been the case for this series. This was a really interesting route. So this was a scratch race around Scotland, and it was called the Breakfast Crits and Grits course. It was actually generated by some racers through sort of voting and people designing their own route. This was a route that was created. As you can see there on that climb gradient, out of the pens we are straight up the Sgurr summit. Thankfully, this is the short side to the Sgurr, so for me, I was quite hopeful that I'd be able to hang with a group here. You can see in the mini-map it has stretched slightly, but this was probably going to produce the first big selection point of today's race. You can see some riders going off the back there. We were each given a power up quite early on. Luckily for me, I had a feather. Now, early on is where this part is quite steep, where this hill is quite steep. This KOM is steep early, so I used my feather really early on that steeper section and just kicked quite hard to make sure that I was fully embedded in the front of the group. There was a slightly flatter section there, and if you look up to the mini-map, there's a couple of riders have been distanced, but on the whole, the peloton has kind of regrouped. And then we've got another little kicker here, just before we kind of come to the KOM line, so it was just important just to dig deep again. I'm kind of like mid 7 watts per kilo, sort of on the steeper sections, and then probably 5.5 watts per kilo on the shallower sections. So I get to the top of the climb here. What have I averaged? 430 watts, 429 watts from the start. And for 2 minutes, that's, that minute effort up the climb there, minute and a half effort was probably more like 500, 550. So very doable for myself over a short sort of duration. Actually, I started this race and I was quite happy now. I was well in bed. I was easily in the front group. But we really didn't know how this was going to play out. It was a really interesting course. There were lots and lots of kickers, lots of hills. We were chatting in our Discord beforehand. We didn't know whether riders were going to try and go hard as a team, try and create some sort of gap or breakaway or make it tough, using some of the multiple features that are on this course. Luckily for me, at the start, I was feeling really good. I actually said in Discord to John, one of my teammates, when he came on, I started my warm-up, and sometimes you have one of those days where the heart rate isn't running crazy high. You just kind of legs feel good. Luckily for me, I started this race and I actually had one of those days. The legs were feeling quite good. So ordinarily, this is a really high-level group. There's some fantastic riders, really strong riders in this field here, because this is an A1 division. And on a hillier sort of circuit, I would probably have a little bit of difficulty kind of hanging in with them. But I was feeling, like I say, I was feeling quite good, My heart rate barely went into threshold, oddly, on that climb. And then on the descent there, you can see it's already come down to 147, which is really nice and low for me. That's well down. For some people, that might be high. But for myself, my threshold heart rate doesn't really kick in until maybe sort of 180 beats a minute. So down in the 140s is easily down in zone 2. So I'll scan on through the race. It was quite a steady race, in all honesty. There was no crazy attacks over any of the climbs, but it fell into quite a predictable rhythm. And we'll just take a little look at that now. So we went over the climb. in Glasgow, and we've just come through the sprint segment, and there was a small group going off the front here, and the main pack that I was in weren't really riding hard. So I just decided to say I was feeling quite good. I used my Ghost, came off the front of the group, and just thought, let's just bridge across to them, because we really didn't know how this was going to play out. And I sort of felt today, it wouldn't have been something ordinarily I'd try and do, but I could see Sebastian Havok was there, who was a top elite rider. I just thought, I'll try going across, and if these guys decide to put the hammer down, I'm sitting in with them. We did get a second or two over the main pack, but I think that partly me going across and partly just the fact that this almost breakaway just sat up, the group actually came back together. So for a short while there, I was quite hopeful that you never know, maybe this is going to develop into a bit of a break. It has stretched the group, it's hurt a few legs, but it didn't actually really turn into anything. And that, in all honesty, was probably the only... you can see the power's been up. I mean, it's a 340 average there, so it hasn't exactly been easy, but it just kept to this kind of a steady high, but steady power throughout. That was the only real bit of action, so to speak, between now and the finish. We're soon to take on the corkscrew climb, which can be a really defining feature of this Rolling Highlands kind of part of the Scotland map. And then we took on 4 ascents of the breakaway Bray. We'll just have a quick look at one of those ascents, but they fell into quite a predictable rhythm. Okay, so it was a lot of power-ups in this race. I got a lot of ghosts early on. I think I got 3 ghosts on the trot, but actually now I've had a number of feathers, so quite useful on a climb. This isn't the steepest climb. It is up the sort of the shorter and not steep side of the breakaway Bray, but it is still a hill. It is still a feature, and any type of hill or features will always encourage riders to kind of go hard and attack. The feather now lasts for 30 seconds. I mean, it's lasted for 30 seconds, about 6 months or so. And we literally have done 4 laps. I think this is lap 2, but we'll do 4 laps of this little section. But it basically followed a similar pattern. Use the power up nice and early. Give it a kick to kind of sort of high 7s, 8 watts a kilo for maybe 15 to 20 seconds, just to make sure that I'm holding a good position in that pack. There's no need to be right at the front. This is showing no signs of splitting. It's not too steep. So I'm just in bed. You can see we're at 46k an hour there. So just keeping myself nice and safe in the draft of that pack. I'm needing to work. Each climb, we're not taking it easy. It's pushed the heart rate up there. You can see, there's a bit of a sweat on. I'm not exactly looking comfortable, but I'm not sure that I ever do, to be honest, in the picture-in-picture. But... just give it a little kick. Riders were trying to go off the front, as you can see there occasionally, but on this descent, each time around, and like I say, we went round, up and down this climb 4 times, they were quite easily brought back. So we'll just scan through towards the finish now and discuss how that played out. Okay, so this finish was going to go again up the Sgurr KOM climb. Initially, prior to the start, and when I looked at the route profile, I thought that it went up the longer side, which would have been tough for me, in all honesty, to have been able to stay in, but it didn't. The reason why the route profile looked as if it was a longer climb is because it actually comes up the back end of the corkscrew climb here. You see there's a lot of orange numbers, so this actually took quite an effort. It took quite an effort. I could see a lot of orange numbers going off and riders pushing really hard. So I just was conscious that actually this might go here. Riders might get off the front. It might split. The power might stay down. You can see with 3.2k from the line. But it did. It backed off slightly over the top, which was good. Actually, for me, this way in getting to the Sgurr summit was probably it fitted me a little bit better, because what it turned out to be was 3 big pushes. It didn't look like that from the route profile. It just looked like one long climb, which I thought was the north side of the Sgurr, but it wasn't. It was back at the south side of the Sgurr, which is the 1 kilometre climb that we actually started with right at the beginning of this race. But we took on, so that was the checkpoint number 1 essentially, was that corkscrew. Now this is checkpoint number 2 for me. It's this sort of longer drag that when you normally ride the rolling highlands is that long descent down into the climb. I thought for a second that I was in a bit of bother. I was towards the back of the group, which is why I just gave it that bit of a kick. I like, on a sort of climby section, I generally like to sit towards the front of the pack. I am sort of towards the heavier end of riders, not as much as I used to be. I mean, I'm slightly lighter again than I've ever been now at 74.6 kilos, whereas historically I've kind of been sort of mid-80s. I mean, I've really worked quite hard this winter and dropped it slowly. It's a huge benefit to my kind of riding, but it's still, in the scheme of cycling, towards the slightly heavier end. So I tend to like to be towards the front. I actually did use my feather power up there on the slightly steeper section, just to help hold, but I was feeling quite good. The group wasn't going crazy speed, and we've got this slightly flatter section. It was maybe a risk, some people would think, using the feather. I didn't need to use the feather, but I knew that there was another power-up banner before we hit the Sgurr Summit KOM proper. And during the race, I'd kind of come up with a bit of a plan. Not through talking on Discord. We actually didn't bother chatting during the race today. We just had our own music on. But I thought, why not go all out? I was going to struggle to compete with the proper climbers if I just did it in a one-to-one, like a duel, a proper sort of battle. I was going to struggle on a climb. It's just a little bit too long for what I normally like. I quite like a climb maybe 30, 45 seconds where you can just blast it bottom to top. This was a bit longer. So I come up with a bit of a plan that I was just going to hit it hard from the bottom. I was kind of going to go all in, hopefully create a gap, and if the group hung around and they didn't kick off their attacks a little bit later, it might just be enough. It might give me enough of a gap that actually I get away, and I felt as if that would give me a better chance to actually get a good finishing position here than just sitting in and trying to kind of duel it out with people, because I didn't feel that by doing that I was going to succeed. I used the power up because I was hoping for a ghost. I thought, if I get a ghost, I'm going all in here. But I didn't. I had a feather, but I kept to the same plan. So I hit the feather and I've gone. I know that this effort is probably going to be over a minute. So it's not a full-on sprint. There was no way I could sprint 100% here. But it's a really tough thing to get right. I needed to go hard enough that I could try and create a gap from the group, but also I couldn't go 100% with probably what's over a minute, maybe a minute and a half's effort till the top of the climb. So I just kind of hit out there. I kept it in orange numbers, and I've got kind of around 2 seconds after that first steeper section. We've now got 400 metres of the climb, but that's still a reasonable amount of time. We got over the second steeper section and I felt in a bit of trouble. I thought, this is coming back. But then, over that flatter section, I managed to keep a little bit of the power on and kept the gap there. And now we've hit that final steep section. Now I'm really struggling here. But I'm nearly at the line. So I do drop a gear and try and kick. And unfortunately, 2 riders just came through me, but I held on for third. So 50 metres to the line, 2 guys come through me, which was slightly disappointing because it almost played out. It almost worked. I didn't quite have enough. I mean, I averaged nearly 700 watts, not far off 700 watts for the final minute, which during a race, it was something I was pretty happy with. I have done slightly more in the past, but for that to be mid-race, I was actually quite happy with that. But yeah, nearly made it, but you've got to try these things. Okay, so you join me here for the final round of this